This is Story Recapped. Today, I'm going to explain a drama, horror, and mystery film called No One Gets Out Alive. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. A montage of clips from 1963 shows footage of an expedition in Mexico led by a man named Professor Arthur Wells. They arrive at a historical site when they find numerous human bones inside, some even missing their skull. Then, as they dig further down, they retrieve a stone box surrounded by butterflies and moths. Back to the present day, an immigrant, Ambar, comes to America without documentation after her mother died and starts working as a seamstress. She's been staying at a rundown motel, but when asked for an ID so she can stay there longer, Ambar can't provide one. Because of this, she starts looking for a new place to stay. Thankfully, she comes across a posted advertisement about a boarding house at her workplace. Choosing to seize the opportunity for cheap housing, she goes straight to the address and arrives at a large, old-looking estate that would make anyone understand why the rent is so cheap. Once inside, the proprietor, Red Wells, tells Ambar that they're still in the process of fixing up the house because they recently just took over the place. Ambar then sees another lady downstairs, Freya, and asks Red how many people are living there, so Red says that Ambar is only the second tenant next to Freya, and that there are only two of them. The next day, when Ambar goes out to leave for work, she feels ash cling to her fingers when she locks the door. She then suddenly bumps into Freya, who introduces herself nicely, mentioning that there are only the two of them at the house. However, Freya practically says that Red is a liar. Meanwhile, mysterious figures from the upper floors watch Ambar as she leaves, their eyes glowing in the dark. At work, Ambar gets scolded by her boss for doing a lousy job, but she laughs it off with her friend, Kinsey. Kinsey is helping Ambar get forged documentation, but she apologetically informs Ambar that the price for her fake ID has changed from $1,000 to $3,000. Ambar can get a fake ID for $1,000, only if it says that she's from Ohio, but she insists that it has to say that she was born in Texas. That night, Ambar takes a cab to a nice neighborhood to meet a relative, Beto, her mother's cousin. She then overhears him arguing with his wife about her because the woman says that they hardly knew her, but Beto is trying to be understanding. Beto also praises Ambar for staying by her mother's side through her illness, and they even give her a coat out of hospitality. When Ambar gets home, she hears rumbling noises echoing from the hallway and starts following the source of the sound until she finds a door leading to the basement. She then observes the locked door and notices the scratch marks on the door frame, but she gets distracted when Red suddenly appears and asks her if she's looking for something. So Ambar tells him that she's hearing sounds coming from the basement, but Red tells her that the basement is private and tries to dismiss her. Ambar also notices the study room, but Red says that's private too, and quickly closes the door. Ambar only wants her deposit back so that she can use it to get a fake ID, but Red nonchalantly tells her he's already spent it. That night, Ambar hears Freya crying in her room and decides to check on her. However, she finds Freya's room empty and notices ash on the doorframe. She then starts walking away, unable to see a dark figure of a woman inside Freya's room. Confused, Ambar heads to the kitchen to get herself a drink. Then, while doing so, she suddenly remembers her mother on her deathbed. Her mother notices a stone box in the corner, and when Ambar turns to look at it, she sees a pair of hands trying to remove its cover. Luckily, Ambar wakes up and realizes she's just had a nightmare. Feeling hopeless about her financial situation, Ambar goes to the bar with Kinsey after work to talk about her ID and why she desperately needs one from Texas. She explains that her uncle couldn't help her get a job because she wasn't a US citizen, so she lied, saying that she was born in Texas because her mom lived there for a while. After sharing her own story about coming to America, Kinsey offers to cover the rest of Ambar's payment for the fake ID on a deal that Ambar will pay it back when she's able to. Grateful, Ambar gives Kinsey the rest of her remaining cash so that she'll finally be able to get her documents. At home, Ambar hears a thudding sound coming from the hallway and sees a man banging his head on the door, muttering some gibberish. Disturbed, she checks it out but slowly just walks away. Then, as she prepares to sleep, she hears footsteps come and stop in front of her room, and the same man chants once again before slamming his head on the door, leaving an ash imprint. Moments later, Ambar goes downstairs and meets the new tenants, Petra and Maria. Then, when Red comes in to show the new women their room, Ambar asks him about the weird man that she saw earlier, so Red explains that it's just his brother, Becker, and that it's just the two of them. Later on, when Ambar notices that Red has left the study room open, she goes inside to snoop around. She finds a lot of ancient artifacts and preserved moss and butterflies, but what catches her attention is the recorder. Putting the headphones on, she listens to the recording and hears the same chanting done by Becker, as well as the explanation that it's recited during a ritual before sacrificing women, the elderly, or children in return for a blessing. Looking around, Ambar also sees Aztec weapons, a portrait of a married couple with the husband's face scratched out, and more books about rituals. She also finds another picture of the couple, Arthur Wells and his wife, Mary, posing alongside a stone box. Unfortunately, Ambar breaks the framed photograph after getting startled when the recorder suddenly plays, and as she cleans up her mess, she doesn't see the dark figure of a woman watching her from the corner. The next day, Ambar is shocked to learn from her boss that Kinsey has quit. Unfortunately, her boss also gets irritated when she insists on having Kinsey's address, so he ends up firing her. In the evening, while Ambar is taking a shower, she hears some noises from the drain. First, she only hears just a creaking sound, but when she turns off the water, she hears a woman screaming for help. Then she sees Freya behind the shower curtain, but she suddenly disappears as soon as she opens the liner. Scared, Ambar bumps into Red on her way back to her room. She also asks for Freya, but Red says that she's already moved out a couple of days ago. Red then talks about her deposit and says that he can give it back to her the next day, making Ambar feel relieved. Later that night, a moth flies out of the basement and goes to Ambar's room. Meanwhile, Ambar just listens to her mother's recorded voice messages before smashing the insect, only to be surprised when it comes back to life. She then sees her mother at the foot of her bed, spooking her awake and making her realize it was just a dream. However, she sees her door wide open when she sits up, and the lights outside go out. She then hears crying coming from outside and looks for the source, seeing another figure from the room across from hers. She also sees footsteps approaching her, as if chasing something, and Ambar suddenly gets visions from the past. Mary forced to prepare a frightened woman for a ritual, but the victim tried her best to fight back. Moments later, Ambar follows the crying sounds and finds the victim in front of the basement door, pleading for mercy. However, Mary simply stands behind Ambar as they both watch a monstrous-looking hand pull the woman into the basement. Terrified, Ambar hurriedly packs her bag and calls Beto, begging him to pick her up. Unfortunately, Beto is out of town and can't help her, so he tells her to call the police if she's in trouble. Because of that, Ambar finally confesses that she's an illegal immigrant and can't call the cops. Beto is understandably upset that Ambar lied, so he apologizes for not being able to help her, but still promises to see her once he's able to. With no other choice, Ambar knocks on Red's door to get her deposit back, but sees Becker instead, saying that Red is currently out. Refusing to stay at the house any longer, Ambar immediately leaves but struggles to find a place to stay. While staying in a diner, Ambar has another nightmare about being on the train and seeing the stone box and her mother. She then calls Red and asks to meet her, but when Red arrives, she learns that the guy has left her money back at the house. However, Ambar says that she doesn't want to go back, but Red says that he also doesn't want her to return either, especially after having an argument with Becker because of a refund. Despite their fight, Red clarifies that he has to take care of his sick brother, who's taken care of him when he was young. Eventually, Red successfully coerces a hesitant Ambar into going back to the house with him. She then goes to her room because Red says that her money is there, but Ambar can't find it anywhere. Meanwhile, Red appears behind Ambar with a bottle of alcohol and offers her a drink, but she quickly refuses and asks where her money is. She also starts feeling suspicious as Red suddenly starts talking about the weird house and how his father collected old artifacts before killing their mother. Scared, Ambar tries to leave, but Red keeps blocking her way. On the other hand, an impatient Becker bursts into Ambar's room and decides to deal with her himself. He then forces Ambar to drink the alcohol, and Red grabs her phone and warns her not to try to leave before locking her in her room. That night, Maria and Petra plead for Ambar to let them in her room, so she does. Then, after finally realizing that something is wrong, the three stick together. They also share common experiences they've had while staying at the house, including their dreams where they all see the same stone box, which Petra believes is in the basement. Later on, Petra points out the sounds of women crying in the basement, but Maria says those women are dead. Petra then sings to Maria to calm her down, and as Ambar looks around the room, she sees the old victims of the household. Meanwhile, Petra and Maria disappear from the bed, and when the ghosts vanish too, Ambar sees her mother calling out to her in the hallway. Then, it isn't long before Ambar wakes up from her dream and realizes the brothers are taking Petra and Maria. The women desperately try to fight back, but when the doorbell rings, Becker locks Ambar in the room while Red gets the door. It turns out, Beto hasn't forgotten his promise to get Ambar, but Red stops him at the door. On the other hand, back upstairs, Ambar screams and bangs on the window to get Beto's attention, but she can't be heard. Red tries to send Beto away, but Beto notices Ambar's coat in the hallway and refuses to leave. Then, Ambar smashes the window and finally gets Beto's attention, so the man pushes Red out of the way and rushes inside to find her. He quickly tries to help Ambar escape, but Red alerts Becker, who mercilessly beats him to death. Unfortunately, Ambar can only sob and hopelessly beg Becker to leave Beto alone. Enraged, Becker instructs Red to prepare Ambar for the sacrifice. Ambar is then chained as she watches Maria get carried down to the basement, and when Becker tells Red that Ambar is next, he tries telling him that there are too many sacrifices in one go. However, Becker ignores him, so Red follows his brother's commands and rubs ash all over Ambar's body. Ambar wants to know what will happen to her, so Red explains that sacrificing women to the box helps in treating his brother's sickness. Red also reveals that their father, Arthur, made their mother Mary help him sacrifice women to the box before killing her, so he and Becker decided to get rid of him. Ambar then pleads with Red that they should escape together, but Red's loyalty to his brother prevails. Moments later, Becker comes to get Ambar and tells her not to struggle as he shows her the scratches on his hand. Ambar also sees that his wound is slowly healing, and she isn't able to fight when the big guy carries him to the basement, where ghosts of the old victims watch them in the hallway. The sacrificial room is filled with lit candles surrounding a stone table that's placed in front of the stone box. Becker removes Maria's body from the table, and Ambar sees that it's been decapitated. Terrified, Ambar tries to crawl away, but Becker easily carries and chains her to the stone bed before proceeding to open the lid of the stone box. The box reveals a long tunnel leading to the infinite darkness, and as Becker leaves, Ambar hears the sound of an approaching monster from within. Ambar stares at the box as butterflies and moths start to fly all over the place, and as she hears the monster coming closer, Beto suddenly shows up and unchains her. Beto assures her that he's fine and helps her escape, but as they go through the back door, she sees two hanging, decapitated bodies. They also try to force the exit open as lights flicker, and once they do, Beto disappears, and Ambar finds herself coming out of the box. She then sees an old memory where she sits beside her mother's hospital bed, and as her mother begs her to stay, she can't help but feel that something's wrong. As it turns out, Ambar is still on the stone bed, dreaming as the monster, which is revealed to be the Aztec goddess, eats Papalotl, crawls outside from the box. Ambar's mother still continues to convince her to stay in her dream state so that the monster can eat her, but Ambar is determined to wake up and kills her mother by suffocating her with a pillow. Meanwhile, the Aztec goddess sees what her victim has done, and when Ambar slowly wakes up, it retreats into the box and closes the lid on itself. On the other hand, Ambar opens the box but only sees a pile of bones inside, not a long, endless tunnel. About to escape, Ambar hears Petra struggling against Becker and Red, so she stops in her tracks to go and help her. She then grabs the Aztec sword from the study room, making Becker realize that something is off. Becker also notices that his wound isn't completely healed yet, so he orders Red to open the door and check what's wrong. Meanwhile, as Ambar goes upstairs, she sees Beto's body and confirms that he is indeed dead. Red then opens the door, and Ambar surprises him and repeatedly strikes him with the sword. Eventually, a fight breaks out as Becker pushes Ambar to the floor, breaking her ankle with his foot as he grabs the sword. At the same time, Petra breaks free and pushes Becker before he can slash Ambar, so he deals with her by throwing her to the ground floor. Meanwhile, Ambar tries to crawl away, but Becker drags her across the room and tries to strangle her. Luckily, Ambar manages to grab a piece of the sword shard and cuts his jugular vein before repeatedly smashing his head in with the sword. Moments later, Ambar starts limping away, but she sees Red still alive and struggling, so she gives him a taste of his own medicine and sacrifices him to the Aztec goddess. She then starts walking to go to the door outside, but as the creature accepts her sacrifice, Red's ghost appears in the house. There was no Red Dead Redemption this time. However, she just ignores it and tries to leave, but suddenly, she feels the effects of the sacrifice as her injuries start healing. Then, Ambar looks back at the house and decides to stay, as she too accepts the power of the Aztec goddess in her life.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.